Hey everybody, TacticAngel here, back on the PlayStation 4. Well, not exactly, but back to talk a little bit about World Warships Legends news. Today we'll be running down the news from the Lone Veteran update for June 2020, and information coming out around that. I've left some time codes down in the description, as well as links if you'd like additional information. For this video, I'm going to start with some info on the live stream because there's a lot of really interesting stuff that came out with that. We'll run down the patch notes then, and then also look at the campaign missions. So first, talking about the stream, we're going to be talking about a lot of information in the next few minutes, and this is going to be a pretty broad summary of stuff that Wargaming is working on. I will draw your attention to that working on something doesn't necessarily mean coming anytime soon, and unless there is a time frame in the notes I've put on the screen, assume it means that it'll probably come sometime, and probably no sooner than 4 months from now. If you want more information, I would say, whether you typically watch their live streams or not, this was probably the most interesting one to watch. It will add the least amount of sodium to your diet, though sadly it was the first stream I've seen from Wargaming that was completely without singing. In order of things that are probably newsworthy, starting with the things that are a pretty big deal, Wargaming announced aircraft carriers will be coming to Legends, and they intend to start working on them pretty soon. If they're only starting to work on them, and considering the size of this change, you can probably figure that it'll take them several months to come up with something that's even vaguely playable, and you'll probably even be done with that ship you're working on in the Bureau by then. Once they have a working proof of concept, they do intend to have a test event, similar to the Yamato event from last year. Considering the state of aircraft carriers on PC, I do hope that they are open to having several public tests, because these ships can have a pretty profound amount of impact on the game, and I think the general consensus is on PC that they're not all the way there yet, something that I would agree with, honestly. My apologies to our PC refugees out there, but if I were a betting man, you probably have several months or maybe even a year before you really need to worry about CVs too much. In a similar vein, submarines aren't coming to Legends anytime soon. This makes sense if you're familiar with the PC development because, of course, they were just tested within the last month or so on the PC, so still fairly early in their development. Wargaming is working on support for next-generation consoles for both the PlayStation 5 and the new Xbox. The first step is simply getting the game to run correctly on the new systems. After that, they'll be looking into graphical improvements like ray tracing and so on. Somewhat related to this, they weren't satisfied when trying to push 4K on the PlayStation, and I get the sense that it's probably not going to be a priority of theirs anytime soon, particularly with the next generation on the horizon. Wargaming is looking into improved secondaries, or as they put it, making them at least somewhat useful. This is great news for all of my brawling battleship friends out there, and for people familiar with other versions of World of Warships, it sounds a little bit like they're leaning towards more of a PC implementation of designating a target for secondaries rather than the blitz-style manual aiming of secondaries. By the end of the year, we will see one new nation, one alternative line for an existing nation, and one new line to fill out another nation. Best guess is that they are probably Italians, then either Royal Navy heavy cruisers or Japanese gunboat destroyers, and French destroyers respectively. But Wargaming did not show their hands as far as what those lines may be, so it's entirely possible that I'm wrong here. In any case, sounds like a pretty decent amount of content. You will have some additional comm wheel options, as well as a ship horn coming in July. Being able to ping the map is going to follow probably 2 updates after that. They're also adding a quick command log in case you have turned on National Voices or some other commander, and you can't really understand what's being said. Sadly, the announcement of friendly consumable use, though, is not being worked on in connection with this. Next, they are probably not going to be making a tutorial for Legends, essentially because it would be fairly difficult, expensive in terms of development, the game is fairly hardcore or complicated, and there are online resources to help new players who are really interested in getting better. I think they mean videos like this. Clans, yes, they are coming. but they want to make them work natively inside of Legends itself. If you're familiar with how this works on World of Tanks console, you have to manage your clan interactions from a computer, essentially. So this sounds like a better implementation, where you'll be able to invite people and accept invites in the game. There is a legendary tier perk rework in the works, admittedly not a great sentence, but apparently people don't feel that there's enough power behind what you get with legendary perks, which is probably true if you're not using Will to Rebuild, Unstoppable, or anything above the first legendary rank on my personal favorite, Fully Packed. We will be getting legendary destroyers, and I'm going to kind of lump this in because I would be surprised if it wasn't a legendary ship, but we should be seeing HMS Minotaur sometime. There will probably be a version of the Megami with its 155mm guns, but it is probably going to come out as a completely different ship. Other things that are being planned for development, but had less specific answers, are an armor viewer is probably going to happen sometime, a detailed battle report will as well, probably replays also, that didn't sound super concrete. We'll eventually be able to see detailed stats, so wins, losses, and so on a ship-by-ship basis. They do not intend to work on post-World War II weapon systems, and by that I assume they mean missiles. Operations like you find on PC are not coming to Legends before the end of this year, for sure, but other events like a Halloween mode may make a return. They are reviewing spawns again, which probably is going to be necessary if they want to implement carriers, but don't hold your breath for a booster conversion quick menu option or weather effects that alter gameplay anytime soon. So a lot of information there, and my apologies if I've missed anything, but like I said, a very informative stream, and I have left a link down in the description if you want to go check it out for yourself. They had a developer on there with our community managers, and honestly, I think even they were getting some information they weren't expecting. Moving right along to the patch notes, there aren't really too many things I feel we need to cover, so hopefully we can keep this under 20 minutes. The Bureau has been updated to allow you to assign patrons, who are commanders who essentially boost the progress of your research, and seem to have a pretty significant amount of impact on how quickly you can complete each segment. There's also a new project available in the Bureau. This particular project is longer than the tutorial, but quite a bit shorter than what you'll need to get a legendary ship, and nicely also gives you the chance to earn permanent camouflage for 7 United States cruisers and battleships, including the Tier 7 cruisers Baltimore, the yet-to-be-released USS Cleveland, and the battleship Iowa. After that, you can pick up the Tier 5 premium ship USS California as well. In order to get through this quickly, you will need the USS Wichita, which is kind of a bummer if you don't want the ship or can't afford it. But you can still make progress even without that, it'll just take you a little bit longer. And though this is coming out right around July 4th, and kind of looks like a seasonal thing, this project actually isn't going to leave the Bureau either, so you can take your time. Making things even more festive, at least from the American point of view, we can look forward to a first win bonus between July 3rd and July 6th, which will give away free camouflage and basic containers for playing American ships between Tiers 3 and Tiers 7. In even more American news, the Dallas and the Helena enter the game in early access as part of a split for the American light cruisers, and hopefully this does mean that we'll be seeing those Japanese gun destroyers and Royal Navy heavy cruisers before too long. There is some Warhammer 40,000 licensed content in the store for limited time only. If you are unfamiliar with Warhammer 40k, it is the origin for the term Grimdark. It started as a tabletop miniature game, though there are several video games of widely varying quality, and features space orcs, space humans, space elves, space demons, and some other races, locked in an epic quest to see who can exterminate everyone else first, almost exclusively along racial or religious grounds. The only real exception to that being a couple of factions who just want to butcher everyone just for the fun of it, hence the Grimdark. As some of you may know, I've been a huge fan of Warhammer for at least the last 25 years, but I'm a bigger fan of history, so I don't really intend to cover any of this content, other than really this section of this video. And honestly, I might go back and play a stream of one of the better Warhammer games, just for fun. Nevertheless, in this collaboration, you can pick up 2 different premium skinned Nagatos, one for the Americans and one for the Japanese. along with a pair of commanders with some abilities which seem questionable. If you don't want to pony up $60 for one of these bundles, there are loot boxes that might give you some random stuff, including either of these ships or either commander. If you want to see the odds for all of the loot boxes, there is a link down in the description. We've also seen several balance changes, including taking away the 30mm armor from the Chapayev, which will make her more vulnerable to battleship hits now, though she was given a slightly more effective heal to compensate for this balance change. The Magi has been made around 6.5% more accurate, and the Richelieu was given a buff to her turret HP, which ought to mean that her turrets will get knocked out significantly less often than her higher rate of fire sister ship, the Jean Bart. The 25% bonus to base XP that was present on premium ships has been removed and replaced on the back end with a similar 30% bonus to keep their XP gain relatively similar overall. Per Prince Blip, if anything, this equates to a minor buff, but it will help remove some of the preference in ranked battles where premium ships were less likely to lose a star. I haven't done any of the math for this myself, so let me know if you think this isn't working as intended. There also have been several bug fixes and miscellaneous improvements. I will draw your attention to needing to actually participate in a game you win to get bureau credit. Also, it's nice that they've corrected some of the descriptions for different ships where the ship traits were somewhat misleading. This doesn't have any effect on ship performance in the game, but you wouldn't want somebody to buy a ship based on a description that wasn't quite true. And of course, as part of this update, we now have this new campaign, with a new Tier 7 American cruiser to earn. This time it is the USS Wichita, in the Lone Veteran campaign. As usual, I hope to have my review of this ship out actually tomorrow, but right now we'll just run down the general shape of the campaign to earn her. Unlike previous campaigns, there is a new concept that they're trying out, which is sort of a hard mode objective for each week, except for the last one. Completing all the hard mode objectives will allow you to unlock the Wichita a week earlier than normal, and near as I can tell, this means that you have a lot more of a buffer to complete the campaign than ever before. I guess we'll see how it plays out. In any case, the hard mode objective can only be completed after all the other objectives are done as well, so keep that in mind as we're going through this. As usual, all endurance trials can be completed either in AI or standard battles, but shakedown trials and hard mode trials need to be completed in standard battle only against other human beings. So looking at week 1, overall completing this week is more or less a matter of how much time do you want to play. Hopefully it doesn't take you too long to win a battle, and after that all of these are pretty much just putting in the requisite XP or credits. Playing the large and still growing number of Pyromaniac cruisers out there is probably going to be the best way to get past your shakedown trials, since you will need to cause 300,000 damage to enemy ships with your main battery and set 15 fires. The hard mode will be a little bit more of a tricky thing depending on how often you place at the top of your team. For the most part, this really does mean coming in first on your team when your team wins, though every once in a while you do see someone from the losing team, essentially, fail to carry hard enough to win a game, and in that case, you can hardly feel bad if that person snuck away with a win here, but that's really something that only happens very rarely. In week 2, like previous campaigns, everything ticks up just a little bit. You need to win an additional game, so here we have 2 games, earn an extra 1,000 XP, earn an extra 100,000 credits, and another 150 global XP. Then you'll be into the shakedown trials, which can pretty easily be accomplished at the same time. Tougher cruisers won't be a bad choice to get through this as quickly as you can, though you might come up a little short on potential damage. And that is damage that might have been caused to your ship, but either came up as misses, shatters, or bounces. The other option to do this quickly is to probably find a fast-firing battleship, but then you'll probably get held back by the number of shells you can dish out per round, so ultimately, a 50-50 approach will probably work best here. The hard mode mission after that is pretty challenging. Essentially score a Kraken Unleashed. Really, this is going to come down to what you want to play that's tier 5 or higher. Not to spoil the rest of the campaign, but this is actually probably going to be the most challenging hard mode mission for most people. But you don't have to actually complete any of the hard mode missions to complete the campaign. In week 3, the difficulty ramps up a little more. You need to win 3 games now, earn an extra 1000 XP, an extra 1000 credits again, and 200 global XP. There's also a fifth segment here that requires 12,000 commander XP. If you're leveling up a ship, this last one is probably easiest to do if you stack an XP flag on your ship and then throw a commander's XP flag on top of that, since these numbers are essentially multiplied against one another. If you don't want to do that, then I guess it's just a matter of playing. Your shakedown trials are probably going to require a combination of cruiser play and destroyer play, but you could pretty comfortably get this done with either one, with German and Japanese cruisers being pretty good contenders for doing it at the same time, and pretty much anything other than a Japanese destroyer being workable as a destroyer pick. The hard mode objective is to do 140,000 damage in a single battle, which ought to look fairly familiar to those of us who've been playing since the beginning. The favorite for this kind of damage total these days seems to be shooting HE, with Russian cruisers probably being the odds-on favorite for what everyone is going to be playing to try to finish this leg of the campaign in this particular week. As we move into week 4, I'm fairly certain the presentation of this information was a little messed up in the Legends webpage, so I apologize if I've screwed anything up in trying to correct that. In any case, this is probably the most difficult week in terms of the overall grind. You need to win 3 battles still, earn 14,000 XP, 1 million credits, 1,250 global XP, and then 14,000 commander XP. My previous notes about stacking flags still apply here if you want to get through this quickly, or quicker. The shakedown trials seem to be do 40,000 fire damage, score 12 citadel hits, and then place in the top 2 of your team, win or lose. Since this is completed at tiers 3 and up and tiers 4 and up, I might remind you that some of you are probably working on a bureau project that may require the use of an Omaha or Königsberg. This might be a good time to take those into standard battles because the first 2 missions here are exactly what the Omaha and Königsberg are pretty good at. And while you're playing, you might as well try to double or triple dip your objectives and make your limited game time pay off as much as possible. I believe the hard mode mission for this week is similarly score 8 citadels in one single game. Realistically, you're more likely to do this in a cruiser than a battleship, based on rate of fire, and just because the entire enemy team may run out of hit points before you can citadel them 8 times. And for my money, I'd go with Royal Navy cruisers as probably the best choice here, though German and Americans aren't that far behind. Remember though, this has to be tier 5 or higher. And it is at this point, if you've completed all of the hard mode missions, that you would actually finish the campaign, and you'd get the Wichita essentially just a week earlier. And once again, the hard mode missions aren't mandatory, so if not, there's always week 5. And with that, week 5 is very similar to week 3 in terms of overall what you need to do to get through those endurance trials. So easier than the last week that we just talked about. That said, there are 3 shakedown trials this week, and other than the one where you need to do 300,000 damage to enemy ships, they have the potential to be fairly grindy. The second trial is earn 10 capture or assisted captures, and if your life is anything like mine, this probably means that you're only going to get capture the base missions anytime you're trying to do this. Finally, in 7 games, join the top 3 of your team by experience received. Thankfully, this doesn't require a win again. And honestly, sometimes it's a lot easier to get this if you lose. But those 2 could take a pretty decent amount of time if you're unlucky, and my guess is that they'll take you no less than 7 games. In any case, that's pretty much all I had for you today. I hope this little rundown has been useful. Once again, I will draw your attention to the links down in the description if you want to read more or watch the Wargaming stream. So thank you everybody for listening, and I'll see you on the next one.